I've made my opinions about romance films pretty clear in the past, but if you're new here, a brief refresher, it's not a genre I particularly care about, especially when they are set in a high school, but that is for more personal reasons. That's not to say I haven't seen romance films that have actually done a good job of telling the story, or that have eventually won me over. I mean, off the top of my head, the two that I actually liked and enjoyed would be If I Stay and About Time. That said, what annoys me about romance films as a genre is that so many of these films resort to cliches. Cliches that I think a lot of people are just a little too forgiving of. Now, I understand not everybody watches movies as much as I do, so many people don't notice it, but honestly, when I call some films out on these cliches, people often just respond to me saying, oh, well, you just don't get it because you haven't been in a romantic relationship or you're just not a romantic person. Whereas to that I say, no, the film shouldn't have to resort to lazy storytelling and should actually try to make you care about the character so that way you actually care about the romance. Like If I Stay does really, really well. With that in mind, given that the screening and the promotion of the film in general is sponsored by a fashion magazine, you can probably guess what type of romantic comedy I had to sit through. No, I did not buy this magazine to make a point. They were literally giving these to each person that went to the screening I went to as they were entering the theater, alongside this fancy box of tissues. Yeah. Me Before You is a British romantic comedy that's about a woman who's hired as a caretaker for a man who was left quadriplegic as a result of a traffic accident, who then endeavors to remind him that life is still worth living despite all the crap that happened to you. The first thing that bothers me about this story is that I feel that it's putting its focus on the wrong character. Instead of having it focused on the person who needs to learn the lesson, who's actually been through the crap, and even it was featured in the intro sequence to establish that, they instead have us focus on the manic pixie dream girl. As a result, we're left with a main character that is at best uninteresting and at worst utterly grating. She's so quirky and cheerful and utterly adorable that it just comes across as lazy writing. On top of that, even the quadriplegic character is another basket of cliches. I mean, all of the anguish that he's purportedly going through is told to us through exposition by other characters when the character himself is not even in the room. That is basically how bad this is, because they don't show us anything. They basically just tell it to us. Not to mention that the moment where he suddenly starts opening up is exactly that, sudden. We don't really have any indication or any idea what prompted him to start opening up. It's just suddenly out of the blue like, oh, I suddenly find you tolerable, so I'm going to open up. As for the main source of drama, which I can't really disclose because that would violate my no spoiler rule, even though it kind of fuels the second and third acts, has got to be one of the laziest ways to create drama. I mean, it draws from something that is still very controversial in today's age, and it just tacks it onto the story because it's scary and mysterious enough that most people won't question it, and it makes for cheap drama. And on top of that, the way the people talk about this issue, this very controversial issue in this film, is just appalling, because I'm just like, nobody here is saying anything that anybody dealing with the actual issue would actually say. I mean, I don't know if the laws regarding certain medical practices are different in Britain than they are in the US, but the way that the main characters react in regards to this just makes no sense. It defies logic. This leads me to my next point. The writing. It's the same cliched beats we've seen in so many other romance films since the beginning of film as a medium. There were some moments that elicited a chuckle from me here and there, but they were pretty few and far between, because even some of those moments that did elicit a chuckle I've seen in much better movies. To me, it felt like they had these one or two scenes that they wanted to shoot, but had to loosely string them together in order to hit that 2-hour runtime. On a related note, the visuals are equally as lazy. I mean, yes, it's bright and colorful and eye-catching, but there is no rhyme or reason to the overall aesthetic of the film. Nothing about the visual design is reinforcing the narrative in any meaningful way, and half the time I felt like I was just watching a commercial for some sort of fashion line or some sort of cologne. If you were to take still images from this film and put it in a fashion magazine as an ad, it wouldn't feel too out of place there, but here, when these images are supposed to come together to tell a story, they just don't work. I know I've complained about films that don't use color in any meaningful or impactful ways, but here we have the opposite problem. Everything's so bright and poppy that it all just melts together because, well, that's how every scene looks. Nothing really stands out visually because everything is so vibrant. It's literally, oh, everything is so bright and vibrant to the point that nothing is bright and vibrant. Overall, this is just another paint-by-numbers British rom-com that may as well have been a 2-hour commercial for a fashion catalog. The story is carelessly crafted using romantic comedy shorthand, the characters are bland, uninteresting, and downright unlikable, and to top it all off, the visuals are just an uninspired hodgepodge of bright colors that fails to have any other purpose aside from looking pretty. I mean, even when you compare it to the other romantic films I've seen, this was less enjoyable than the 2 Nicholas Sparks movies I've had to sit through. If you're a fan of romantic comedies or romantic dramas, there are much better films out there than this one. This is just the same bland saccharine madness most people dread seeing when they even think of the term romantic comedy. If you're looking for a film for date night, you're better off streaming something on Netflix because this film is not worth the full ticket price. All of that said, Me Before You gets a 2 out of 5. So that's it for this episode of Romney's Reviews. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.